Most people think the worst thing that can happen to you is losing your mind. But what if you didn't lose your mind? What if you lost your universe? There are 10 stories in existence that scientists, psychologists, and investigators have never been able to fully explain. People who woke up in the wrong reality. People who vanished from one world and appeared in another. People who came back from places that simply don't exist on any map. And the terrifying part? The details match. Across strangers, across decades, across different countries. Today, we're going through all 10 of them, starting from unsettling and ending at something that will genuinely make you question what's real. Because the question isn't whether you believe in parallel universes. The question is whether you'd even know if you crossed into one. Let's get into it.
Number 10. The Man from Torrid. July 1954, Tokyo Airport. Busy day, nothing unusual. Until a man walked through arrivals and handed over his passport. The document looked perfect. Real stamps, real visas, travel history across multiple countries, previous entries into Japan. Everything checked out, except for one field: nationality. Torrid. No such country existed. When the officers pulled him aside for questioning, they expected panic or maybe a confession that the document was fake. Instead, the man was calm and genuinely confused about why they were confused. He said his first language was French, but he spoke fluent Japanese. He said Torrid had existed for over 1,000 years. He said it sat between France and Spain. The officers pulled out a map and asked him to point to it. He pointed directly to Andorra, a real country, a country he apparently had no name for.
Nobody in the room could explain that. The man insisted Torrid should be right there. He looked at the map like something was missing that should have been obvious. The airport decided to hold him while they investigated. They set him up in a hotel room where the guard posted outside the door through the entire night. Morning came. The guard opened the door. The room was empty. The window led to a multi-story drop. There was no way out. And somehow, it gets stranger. Every single document the man had brought with him, his passport, checkbook, and driver's license, had also vanished from a locked security room inside the airport. Not stolen, not misplaced. Gone. Nobody ever identified the man. Nobody ever found him. And nobody has ever been able to explain where he went or where he came from.
Number 9. The Missing Boyfriend. Lenya Barcia lived in Madrid. One morning she woke up and something felt immediately off. Her apartment was the same walls, same layout, but objects were out of place. Almost like someone had moved in who almost knew where everything went, but not quite. Then she reached for her phone and noticed her boyfriend's number was gone. Not just deleted, scrubbed from existence, like it had never been saved. She called her friends to ask about him. None of them knew who she was talking about. She went to file a missing persons report. Police found 0 records of this man ever existing. A psychiatrist suggested stress-induced hallucination. Lenya didn't buy it, especially because the strangeness kept going. Her sister had recently had shoulder surgery, something the whole family had been through together. Lenya mentioned it.
Her family had no memory of any surgery. She went to work, same company, same building, but she was listed under a completely different department, reporting to a manager she had never seen before in her life. She went home early. She was eventually diagnosed with a mental illness. Despite having absolutely no history of psychological issues and no substance use of any kind, Lenya still maintains that she didn't break down, She crossed over, landed in a world almost identical to hers, but with one version of her life quietly replaced by another.
Number 8. The Ghost City. In March 2006, a woman named Carol Chase McHeleny was driving toward Paris, California, when she spotted a sign for Riverside, the city where she had grown up. On a whim, she decided to take the detour and visit. She drove to the street where her childhood home had been. It wasn't there. Not abandoned, not renovated, just gone, replaced by something unrecognizable. She drove to her grandmother's old street. Everything was different, like the city had been redesigned by someone who had only heard a description of it. She looked for the cemetery where her grandparents were buried. Fenced off, completely overtaken by wild grass, no graves, no markers, nothing. Carol drove to University Avenue, which she remembered as a busy commercial strip, full of restaurants and hotels. What she found instead was a block of decay. Graffiti everywhere, buildings falling apart. Not a single person she felt safe enough to approach. She stayed in the car and drove straight back to Paris without stopping.
Years passed. Her father died, and the family decided to bury him in that same cemetery. Carol drove back to Riverside. Everything was exactly as she remembered it from childhood. The cemetery was there, the streets were right, the houses matched her memory perfectly. She stood there trying to make sense of what had happened the first time. The only explanation she ever settled on was that somehow, that day in 2006, she had driven into a parallel version of her hometown. A darker one, a broken one. A version where things had gone very differently.
Number 7. The Castle. A woman shared this story on Reddit about something that happened when she was 4 or 5 years old. She was playing on her front porch with her cousins when 2 teenage boys she had never seen before walked up and asked a strange question. Did they want to see a castle? Something about it felt wrong, but her cousin got excited and pushed for them to go. So the 3 kids ended up walking into the woods behind the property, following these teenagers down a trail that seemed to go on forever. Then it appeared. A massive castle. Gleaming, enormous. The kind of thing you'd expect from a movie set, not from a patch of forest in a regular neighborhood. The kids looked at each other and ran home to tell their parents. The walk back felt like seconds. The 2 teenagers didn't follow.
Her mother went into a panic. And here's where it gets genuinely hard to explain. The mother was known for never letting her daughter out of her sight. Never. The porch door had been open the whole time. There was no way 3 young children could have been led into the woods without any adult noticing. There were no churches, no old buildings, no structures of any kind nearby that could have been mistaken for a castle. But the strangest part isn't the castle itself. It's that all 3 kids, now adults, remember the exact same story. Same details, same sequence, same description of what they saw. Independently confirmed over the years. Nobody has ever been able to explain what those children walked into that afternoon.
Number 6. The Second Chance. This is one of the most shared stories in Reddit history, and once you hear it, you'll understand why. A 14-year-old boy was walking along a trail near an old abandoned railway line. Below the tracks was a lake. A smaller path below led toward town. He wanted ice cream. The nearest shop was down that lower trail, and the only way to get there quickly was to jump from the tracks down to the path. He decided to go for it. The next thing he remembers is waking up in an ambulance. Everything is blurry. The paramedics are moving fast. He tries to move his legs and realizes he can't.
They feel broken. He gets to the hospital, spends a few minutes in the emergency room, and then passes out and dies. Then something impossible happens.
He wakes up again, not in the hospital, on the ground, at the exact spot where he jumped. A car is parked nearby. People are running toward him. They call an ambulance. He goes through the exact same ride, the same hospital, the same emergency room hallway. But this time, his injuries are minor. A split lip, a small jaw fracture, a mild concussion. He goes home that night. For weeks, he tells himself it was a dream. A weird, vivid dream that happened while he was unconscious from the fall. Then his mother tells him what the people who found him said. He had been conscious the entire time, from the moment he hit the ground. There had been no blackout, no confusion. That first version of events never happened in anyone else's memory, only his. He believes he died in one version of that afternoon and somehow woke up in another, one where he was luckier, or maybe one where he'd been given something back.
Number 5. The Philadelphia Experiment. In 1943, the U.S. Navy allegedly managed to make a warship invisible. Not metaphorically, not on radar, actually invisible. The ship was the USS Eldridge. According to the story, it disappeared from the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard and reappeared at the Norfolk Naval Base, over 320 kilometers away, wrapped in a green mist. Then it vanished again and returned to Philadelphia. A sailor named Carl Allen claimed to have witnessed the ship appear in Norfolk. He described the green haze around it, the way it materialized and then vanished. But the part that sticks is what supposedly happened to the crew.
Some went insane. Others developed unexplained illnesses. And according to some versions of the story, a few members of the crew were found physically fused into the metal of the ship, alive but merged with the hull. The experiment was allegedly tied to research involving Einstein's unified field theory, the idea that electromagnetism and gravity could be described by a single framework. Einstein himself never completed that theory. By most accounts, nobody ever has. Except, according to this story, the US Navy cracked it in secret and opened something they weren't prepared for. The Navy denies any of it happened, but the story never fully went away. Number 4. The Father's Voice. A woman posted this on Reddit. She was home alone at night with her 2 daughters while her husband worked the night shift. Around 11 p.m., she was in the kitchen when she heard her daughters arguing in their room, getting louder, starting to cry. Then she heard her husband's voice from the hallway, clearly telling them to stop. She froze. He had already left for work. She assumed he must have forgotten something and come back, so she walked toward the bedroom. Her daughters were looking around the room, asking where their dad was. No sign of him. She checked the garage. His car was gone.
She called him immediately. He was at work. He had been there since he left. He had not come home. Nobody else had a key. Nobody else was in the house. The voice her daughters heard was their father's, not something that sounded like him. His voice in their home, on a night when he was provably somewhere else. Nobody in that family ever found an explanation. Number 3. Canyon of Gadianton. May 1972. 4 girls driving along the Utah-Nevada border through an empty desert road. They hit a fork and turned left, heading into Gadianton Canyon. A few kilometers in, something started to feel wrong. The normal asphalt had been replaced by white concrete road. Thinking they'd taken a wrong turn,
they decided to flip around and head back. On the way back to the fork, the desert was gone. Not faded into the distance, gone. In its place, green trees, open fields, a completely different landscape surrounding the car on all sides. Before anyone could say anything, one of the girls screamed. Coming toward them was a line of vehicles unlike anything they had ever seen. Egg-shaped, 3 wheels, headlights blazing intensely. The vehicles started chasing them. They floored it. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The desert was back. Normal road, normal sand, normal sky. The car rolled to a stop shortly after. 3 tires had blown out at the same time. The next day, a highway patrol officer found them and heard their story. He started to dismiss it, then walked the road and found something he couldn't explain. The tire tracks from their car ended in the middle of the road. No skid, no trail leading off to the side. The tracks just stopped right in the middle of the asphalt, as if the car had ceased to exist at that exact point. Number 2, the 3rd floor. A student was attending a conference at Portland State University. The building was in the middle of renovations. He and another student named Jacob needed to get from the 2nd floor to the 3rd. So instead of taking the stairs, they took the elevator. When the doors opened on the 3rd floor, they stepped out into darkness. No lights, no people, no sound. They walked the hallway looking for their meeting room. They found it. Locked, dark, empty. They looked out the windows. No cars on the street, nothing moving. The entire floor was unrenovated. Old carpet, old paint, everything as it must have looked years before. The elevator doors had stayed open behind them the whole time. They went back in, went down to the 2nd floor. Immediately, people, lights, noise, doors open, construction ongoing, normal. They told their professor what had happened. She said she had just been on the 3rd floor. It was packed. The 2 students walked up the stairs to check. The 3rd floor was fully renovated. New carpet, fresh paint, people everywhere, cars moving outside. Whatever they stepped off the elevator into, it wasn't the building they had been in all day.
Number 1. Pedro Ramirez. November 1986. Late at night, a Spanish man named Pedro Ramirez was driving from Seville to Alcalá, a route he had driven many times, a road he knew perfectly. Then, everything changed. Suddenly, he was on a 6-lane highway that had never existed. To his left, a massive industrial complex he had never seen before. To his right, houses he didn't recognize, tall grass lining both sides. Then, he felt a wave of heat and started hearing voices, not from the radio, around him. One of those voices told him directly that he was in another dimension. Pedro kept driving. The cars around him were models he had never seen anywhere before, shapes that didn't match anything on the market. After 8 minutes of driving through this place, he spotted a turnoff on the left. A sign pointed towards Seville. He took it. He drove. He stopped. He was in front of his house in Alcalá. He had reached his destination. The drive that should have taken much longer had ended instantly. Like the 2 places had been connected through something that shouldn't exist. When he tried to find the turnoff again later, it was gone. The 6-lane highway was gone. No record of any of it on any map. Pedro Ramirez spent years looking for answers. He never found them. 10 stories.
Different countries, different decades, different people. And all of them point at the same terrifying idea: that reality might not be as locked in place as we think. Maybe we slide between versions of it without noticing. Maybe most people stay lost. The real question isn't whether you believe in parallel universes. The real question is whether you've already been to one. If something like this has happened to you, drop it in the comments. I want to read every single one. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.